new careers coming up and new educational needs. So Jim is here on deck. He's going to be speaking a little later on what that all means for us. He's got all the education behind this. He knows what he's talking about. I don't. I'll just ask questions. But let's take a moment in asking our God to be with us this evening, as we know the dignity of who we are and God's creation comes from our Creator, and the gift in which God gives each one of us, the gifts and talents, not just to use it for ourselves, but to use it for the good of the world in which we live, God's creation, and God's people here upon this earth. So let's ask a moment in prayer and ask for that blessing upon all workers in our world, those who are able to give and use their gifts and talents in a good way, and are able to acknowledge that they are working and communicating and living in that world of work and play. So let's ask God to bless us then this evening, open our hearts to understand more of what it means to be a worker in our world today, and how we can participate to bring together the faith and hope in our lives. So we have Tony coming up next here now, and he's going to be explaining a little bit about the theme for tonight and how through CRS we're able to work in that as well. Tony?
Thanks, Father Tom. So the dignity of work and the rights of workers isn't maybe the most foundational principle of Catholic social teaching. I would probably argue that the dignity of all life is the most foundational of all of the principles. But this is the first one. This was the first principle that was developed in our modern time. Back in 1891, Pope Leo XIII was the reigning pope at the time. He had been in office for about 15 years or so. And as the Industrial Revolution was really ramping up in Europe and including Italy, the Pope looked out his window and saw factories where abuses were happening pretty much all over. There were long, hard hours of work. There were conditions that weren't necessarily always safe. There was very little pay for the work that was done, and children many times were put into labor, again, long hours with little pay and little benefit to them. So the Pope at that time, Pope Leo XIII, decided that the church should say something about this. The church should have a voice when it comes to an issue like the rights of workers. And so he put out an encyclical, a letter to the church called Rerum Novarum on the condition of labor in 1891. And that started what we now call modern Catholic social teaching. The very first document to really name an issue that was happening in the world and call forth the church to get involved in that issue. After that, many documents have been written about various issues, be it poverty, the environment, etc. But this particular principle became the first, the rights of workers and the dignity of work. Catholic Relief Services has put out a really fine series of videos, 3-4 minutes in length each, that covers every one of the 7 principles of Catholic social teaching. So tonight we're going to watch what's called CRS 101, the dignity of work and the rights of workers. Let's watch, let's enjoy, but let's talk a bit about how this all became a principle of Catholic social teaching.
For us as believers, the dignity of work comes out of a whole theology of creation. In Genesis, we see that God has made creation and entrusted to us the continuation of His work.
Work is God's gift to us. We're able to use the different gifts that God has given us, physical gifts, spiritual, mental gifts, to make the world a better place.
Because the Church recognizes that every person is created in God's image and likeness and therefore has inherent dignity, we also recognize that work exists for people. People don't exist for work. So recognizing the rights of workers is one of the ways that we honor the dignity of every person.
Among the things that we need to uphold are the just wage, safe working conditions, and the possibility of the worker to participate in the fruits of his labor.
Catholic teaching holds that workers have the right to dignified work, as well as to time for leisure and rest, and they have the right to benefits such as sick leave and maternity leave and paternity leave and health care. Workers have a right to adequate support in their retirement, and also to choose to form unions if that's what they'd like to do. Catholic teaching also holds that workers have responsibilities. They have the responsibility to provide a fair day's work for a fair day's wage. Managers and supervisors and employers can make decisions in their workplaces that uphold the rights of workers, that provide decent wages and a safe working environment.
We have situations here, right in here in our neighborhood, where we've seen people that were not employable. And the best thing is when they can get back on their feet with the help of church and our diocesan programs that will help them find a job with meaning. All of a sudden the neighborhood gets better, they feel great about themselves, and there's a harmony that's created that really shows the dignity of work.
Sometimes it can be easy to forget the workers who are involved in producing the goods that we consume, so it can be helpful to think back. If you take a cup of coffee, thinking all the way back through the roasters and to the farmers who actually grew the beans, there are many workers in that process, and our decisions impact them.
It's important that our people be informed about the different issues around work in our society and try to promote just laws and talk to people about the importance of respecting workers' rights.
As consumers, we need to be aware that really every purchasing decision is a moral decision. We can purchase ethically produced products or fair trade products. We can purchase locally and support local farmers, for example.
All Catholics need to be aware that this is part of the way that we live our life of discipleship by promoting human dignity, defending the workers' rights, and looking for ways to make our society more attentive to the needs of those who are most vulnerable.
Again, as we are all created in God's image, we need to respect and care for each other, whether we're working, whether we're playing, whether we're here in this United States or in the world, no matter where we are, that gift of life needs to be respected. So we have a special guest here this evening. Jim Golembeski is an expert in this. Again, has spent 28 years as the executive director of Bay Area Workforce Development Board, and has been retired. You've been retired for a while now.
Just a year.
Just a year? Oh,
Well,
you're
a
just
couple months.
All right. You're still fresh. You know it all yet. Good. He was responsible for administration of federal and state employment and training funds in an 11-county region of northeast Wisconsin. His main areas of focus were on the strategic planning to meet regional workforce needs, and secondly, to provide services to dislocated workers, at-risk youth, and workers with barriers to employment, and oversight of regional job centers. We talked a little earlier that you had worked with some of the prisons and the situation in that area too, so
Yep.
lots of opportunities to grow. Jim has a master's degree in theology as well as a master's degree in public administration. He's been awarded and is a recipient of the Governor's Cares About Children Award and Green Bay Packers Community Quarterback Award. Again, for his work with the victims of domestic violence as well. So with a big heart and lots of experience, Jim, would you like to take over?
Thank you. Well, this is a real pleasure to be here. Let me, here's the plan. Here's the plan. What I'd like to do is make three kind of overarching statements about the workforce in 2022. And then show you up here an example of how that's playing out in real life in our manufacturing sector. And then we can have some discussion and questions. Does that sound good, or do I want to do something else? Talk about Aaron's contract or bring him back? Okay. All right. So three things I think that are kind of overarching. The first thing is the changing nature of work. You know, and I lived through this 20 years ago when we had a recession that started in 2002 and ran into 2005, and that recession was centered in the manufacturing sector. Because in the old manufacturing, you clawed your way through high school, you went to Fort Howard, you stayed there for 35 years, and you got a great pension. And beginning of the 21st century, we began outsourcing a lot of our manufacturing overseas because labor was cheaper, and technology was changing. And I stood in front of rooms full of middle-aged, gravitationally challenged white guys who had lost their cushy jobs an awful lot in those days. So what we're seeing today is across industry sectors, technology is changing the nature of work. Artificial intelligence, robotics, the sheer amount of data that's available, and so data analysis becomes another big thing. Global positioning, GPS, has changed the construction industry, as has so much. So the nature of work that used to be more muscle, back-breaking work has really changed to more cerebral work. I got to deal with the robot, I got to deal with the computer, I've got to do data analysis. The other thing that's changing in the workforce today is the nature of consumer demand. And number one, the consumers today, I think back, my first car was a 1974 Dodge Dart Swinger. Yeah. Mine was red. And every spring, the engine came in a top and a bottom part, and there was a thing called the rocker cover gasket that sealed the two parts. And every winter that gasket would freeze, and every spring it would crack. And oil all over. Consumers today will not put up with less quality in their products. They will not put up with bad customer service. So the expectations are much higher today. But the other thing that's happening, and this is particularly true of young people, and it resonated with the little video we saw, young people today are very, very aware of where their product's coming from, who's making them and how are they being treated, how are they packaged, what's recyclable. And where we baby boomers throw it, garbage guy comes once a week, fill up the landfill. Young people are expecting their products to respect human dignity globally, not just in this country, and they want to make sure that those products are eco-friendly, that they can be reused or recycled, and the packaging that are used, and of course ethical treatment of animals and all that kind of stuff. So number one, the nature of work is changing today in 2022, very different than it was even 10 or 15, 20 years ago. Okay, so number one. Number two, the workforce is changing. So for half of a century, the baby boomers ruled, you know, because there were so many of us. And this is something I've been talking about for 20 years. So what are we seeing now? Well, the baby boomers as an age group are roughly ages 58 up to about 74 or 75. So guess what we're doing? We're retiring and we're walking out the door. But we're also living longer, which is changing kind of, again, the nature of the demand within the society. But, you know, my favorite uncle, a guy named Clarence Olsen, was a tough old Norwegian, big barrel-chested guy. Clarence died in 1973. He had a heart attack. He was 63 years old. He had a heart attack. He was dead before he hit the ground. Words like HDL, LDL, triglycerides were not in Uncle Clarence's vocabulary, you know? So anyway, we baby boomers have just dominated the workforce for the better part of 50 years, but we are moving out. And so the workforce that's coming in, very different values, very different understanding of work-life balance. So behind us comes what we call Gen X, which is a much numerically smaller group of people, roughly age 40 up to 58 today. And then those darn millennials from about age 20 up into their late 30s. The millennials are known as the baby boomlet. They're the children of the baby boomers. Lots of baby boomers, lots of children. The millennials have struggled because they were miseducated. We baby boomers told them, go to college, doesn't matter what you take. And so we have an oversupply of sociologists, psychologists, communication degrees, political science degrees, when we need tradespeople. But little by little now, so the millennials, as they get into their 20s and 30s, are beginning to become adults. They're coming late, but they're beginning to become adults. So we see them doing the things now that adults do. Get married, have kids, buy a car and take out a car loan, and buy a house. So one of the reasons that there's so much discussion throughout the state and really throughout a lot of the country about affordable housing is this large millennial group is coming into the housing market. So that's the millennials, and they're gonna drive our workforce for the next 30 or 35 years. And their attitude toward the world, their attitude toward work, their attitude toward what they want out of life, very different than what baby boomers. I used to do this baby boomer imitation, and I don't know if you can put me on there for a second, so I can do my baby boomer imitation.
Yeah, give me a second here.
Okay, she's gonna, Miss Kate is gonna, so I can do my baby boomer imitation. It's worth seeing, especially since I am one. Let's see what we got here. And it just takes a second, then you put the other one back on. Oh, hold on, she's working here. She's working. Ah, here we go. Baby boomer imitation. Who wants to work overtime? I do. Your kid has a basketball game tonight. Who wants to work overtime? I do. Your marriage is going to hell. Who wants to work overtime? I do. That's baby boomers. Employers love baby boomers. Xers, millennials, not so much. Thanks, that's all I really need. And then behind the millennials, another generation, some call them Gen Z, some call them the I generation, I call them the cloud. Just because cloud computing has changed everything. You don't need a hard drive anymore. And that's a numerically smaller group as well. They're still the leading edges in high school. We don't know a lot about them other than they're getting career planning and they're going to be much more engaged with the workforce. Again, two things. Number one, the nature of work is changing. The nature of the workforce is changing. And then number three, the video again talked a lot about the dignity of work. In the past, the dignity of work has meant male, Caucasian, non-Hispanic, and I joined the union. And the union protects me from the evil employer. With the changing nature of the workforce, the whole notion of the dignity of work is changing. Because now I can no longer have that girly magazine picture in my locker there because there's women and it's harassment. And we have to think about the dignity, not just of male, Caucasian, non-Hispanics. We have to think about the dignity of women. We have to think about the dignity of racial and ethnic diversity, workers who fall into that category. We have to think about the nature of LGBTQ community. We have to think about people with disabilities. So the whole notion of the rights of workers is really evolving and has been evolving for about 10 or 15 years now. And you obviously cannot do things that 10 years ago or 15 years ago we men would have been stupid enough to do. So those are my three kind of overarching things. The nature of work is changing largely due to and the change in consumer desires. The nature of the workforce is changing as the boomers move out and the groups behind us come in. And the nature of the worker right is changing as the workforce becomes more diverse in so many ways. With that, if you could pull up, Kate, the Manufacturing Alliance website for me. So this is, in 2006, we had a handful of manufacturers here in Northeast Wisconsin come to us and say, we have a problem. Baby boomers are retiring, and everybody thinks manufacturing is dumb and dirty, and it's not, and we have to make manufacturing attractive to a younger generation. So we created the Northeast Wisconsin Manufacturing Alliance. So Kate, if you could go down below the pictures that are scrolling, there are four circles. If you could click on the left-hand one where it says Alliance Member Directory on the other side. Yeah, on your left. There we go. There you go. So this is 15 years ago. And now if you could just scroll down for me. And these are the members of our Manufacturing Alliance today in 2022. They have just jumped on this whole thing. And these are all Northeast Wisconsin. We're not talking even the state or national. These are all manufacturers in Northeast Wisconsin who are working together to do one thing, find workers. And this, I mean, we started with 5 companies 15 years ago, and this thing just blew up on us. And it's been amazing, absolutely amazing. All of these companies working together to do, so this tells you about the changing nature of the workforce. 30 years ago, these companies would sit there, and if you worked for them, the boss would say, if you don't like this, there's 10 guys outside waiting for your job. It doesn't work that way anymore. The employers have to go out and find these people, okay? So if you go back to the home page, and there we go.
I can't find my mouse.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
The mouse has run away.
It's on the wrong page.
Okay.
It was on the wrong page.
All right. Yeah, go back to the main page. And then just scroll down a little bit. Yeah, right there. So for 12 years, right there is good. The manufacturers have put out these all-star magazines. They print out 20,000 copies of them, and they send them out to all the school districts in Northeast Wisconsin. And they feature young people who have jobs in the manufacturing world. So if you could play that other video, just a piece of it. So I want to show you, this is a couple years ago, and a young man named Brian Vanden Langenberg won the All-Star Award. And we also then make videos of them, and we're going to pull Brian up here. That's an old guy.
You're just gonna give me a second?
I will give you a second. But I want to show you this as another example of what I've been talking about.
I'm gonna cut your mic now.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
Brian Vallingberg. We're at Robinson Metal Inc. And we're a fabrication shop. Basically, whatever an engineer dreams up you can put it to a drawing, we'll build it. From aerospace industry to food industry, paper converting stuff, and we build whatever they need. I've been at this company for about 5 years, but I graduated in '95 from high school, and I almost immediately started working in the field. I was a machinist for about 5 years before my car accident. And then I went back to school, got a mechanical design degree, and now I'm doing programs for lasers. When we get a job, we normally get assigned to a crew, but there's a lot of people that have to do their jobs to make sure that the crew can build it. There's, like I said, ordering the steel, there's programming, laser, water jet. After it gets through that, there's the actual building of it, and then inspection. So there's a lot of guys that are involved. When you do a job, you want to make sure you did it right, and you can always get feedback from the guys on the floor about maybe even the next job, about maybe something to do differently. Yeah, I'm in a chair, and people see that, and it's
Tell them, oh, I got her. Thanks, she's good. Miss Kate is good. So again, what do we see? A manufacturer actively going out and saying, "You got a disability, come and work for me." You know, and some of the other, if we go through it, if you just Google NEWManufacturingalliance.org, you can find all of this stuff. And once we get the web page back up here, the emphasis on women and ethnic diversity. If you can go back to the top, yeah, and where it says educators and students. Yeah, educator, and then the second one where it says All-Star magazines. So these are just the covers of the All-Star magazine over the years. And I want to show you, we're seeing some darker skin, we're seeing some women, keep going, obviously young people. We got, some obviously, and the one on 2014, Miss Aaron with her full, lovely young lady with full welding gear, and she's a Cracker Jill welder. But again, you're seeing some ethnic diversity, certainly some gender diversity. Brian with, so I mean, they've just done some tremendous things to say we need to change the way manufacturing looks to the world. And they're doing some really cool stuff to do it. So you can go on all of these magazines, and every one of the 12 winners every year has a video on YouTube to talk about their job and how they got it. And so that's pretty exciting, but our manufacturers have certainly recognized that that the nature of the workforce, very different, and if we're going to survive as employers, we have to bring them in. All right, up with those three, if you go back once more, go back to the home page, and then under the picture, those 4 circles, and if you click on the third one called Get Real Math, this is one of the most brilliant things that our manufacturers have done, because they're showing you the changing nature of the workforce. So I could take you to places in this state and places in this country, and if you talk to a manufacturer, what you would hear is, "Gol darn kids don't want to work. Gol darn schools don't know how to teach." What these manufacturers did is they met with middle and high school math and science teachers. So if you just scroll down, and I don't think we'll go into this, but these are called Get Real Math videos. So what happens, you can stop right there, is the manufacturers work with the math teachers and find a math problem. They film it in the company and create a lesson plan, and these are all aligned with Common Core standards. So a math teacher who needs to teach fractions can go in here, and there's about 90 of these now. So a teacher can go in and say, okay, well, what does rigging have to do with math? What do toilets have to do with math? There's one in here from Georgia Pacific where the guy shows you a 7-ton roll of paper, and the kids have to figure out how many rolls of toilet paper you can get out of it. And the trick is, at the end, it's 2 ply, so you have to divide by 2. There's also one in here that shows you how up in Marinette they make these littoral combat ships for the Navy, and it shows you how to calculate the center of gravity of this 400-foot 5-story ship. So I mean, some of them are very complex. But again, what you see the manufacturers doing is, number one, what I said, the changing nature of the workforce. Here it is, and here's how you use math to do it, and here's why you better pay attention in math class. And not only that, but instead of just having a problem in the math book, here's a video that shows you how it works. So they're doing that. They're attracting they're attracting this younger workforce, and their magazines are definitely showing that the workforce is changing. So that's kind of my point. I mean, I can show you the Manufacturing Alliance doing some really cool things. We also have a New North Digital Alliance that's doing some wonderful things, and I've kind of been working with the construction companies, although they're a lot slower to get going. But they're all in the same boat, is we need workers. There's not as many workers are available. The millennial generation that really is entering the workforce is miseducated for what we really need, and we got to do better at doing this kind of stuff. So with that, I'll be quiet for a little bit and see whether we have some questions or comments or want to have some more discussion. Okay. Do you want that?
Keep that.
Okay.
We get another one.
Okay.
Unless you want, where you're going.
No, I'm fine. Got it.
Okay.
You can go back to the line. Okay.
It's fascinating to, I'm one of those sociology majors. I'm worthless in the workplace today, obviously. It's fascinating kind of historically. I was just kind of going through the as you're talking, there's the Industrial Revolution in the sense of it coming on board, and again, the employers are like, there's 10 of you out there, but the employees along the way also figured out there's another job down the road. I don't have to put up with this, and there's always this swapping back and forth. That's my Two Rivers experience in the wood industry over there. But then we got into World War II and Rosie the Riveter and the women coming on board and doing, as you were talking earlier, the women are out there welding and being taught to weld in the prisons, and the whole sense of the gender shift. And then it seems like, I'm not sure I have this historically correct here, but the colleges came in and all of a sudden it was, I think as baby boomers, that we kind of push into everybody needs the experience, and lots of parents were like, I don't care what you do, you need the experience of college. Go to college, go to college, go to college. And I guess a couple of things that you mentioned already, the transforming of the employees in the workforce and the job situation today. But just on the Hinge thing, what is your sense of colleges? Where are they going? Where, they have this whole market and what they're trying to do, and where do they go and where are they?
Well, number one of the big developments we've just seen in the last several years is the state has really consolidated and frankly all but closed the two-year campuses. It used to be, again, mom and dad, you got to go to college, and so, okay, I'm a C+ student, I can't get into Eau Claire, can't get into Oshkosh, so I go to the Fox Valley, 2-year until I can get in. Well, when the manufacturers started doing this from 2006 to 2016, in that 10-year period, they quadrupled the number of welding students in Northeast Wisconsin. They tripled the number of machining students. Well, where do you suppose those kids were going before? Into the 2-year system. And because we were attracting them now into the trades, the number of students leaving high school and going into the university system went down considerably. And then, and they're also seeing that now as the millennials, which again are a large, numerically large group, move out, and the Generation Z, or the cloud as I call them, are beginning to exit high school. They're a numerically smaller group. There just aren't that many kids to go around. So I'm not surprised that we've seen some consolidation in the university system. The second thing that's happened is while the technical colleges were very quick to respond to this. Back in 2005, we were coming out of a recession, and we had a huge layoff over in Manitowoc, over in Muro Aluminum, and our job was to provide services to those workers. So that was about 1,300 men and women, and who frankly, had a low level of skills. When we went in and tested about half of them were reading at a 4th grade level, doing math at a 4th grade level, and yet they had these good jobs. So they needed to be retrained. Lakeshore Technical College, which serves Manitowoc and Sheboygan County, didn't have a welding program. This is 2005. This is 17 years ago. So we helped them start that, and of course today they have one of the best welding programs in the state. But the technical colleges responded very, very quickly to this need. The university a lot slower, but now 5 years ago, university here at Green Bay has bachelor's degrees in mechanical engineering, environmental engineering, and electrical engineering. And the former Chancellor Gary Miller had to fight hard because Platteville and Stout didn't want Green Bay competing with those classes, but we got them. So we're seeing the nature of education change a great deal. The other thing that's happening in education, which I'm very excited about, I have 2 stepsons, and they both graduated just in the late 90s. And when they were in school, 2nd semester senior year was a blow-off. You had enough credits to graduate, take some, underwater basket weaving. Now what we're seeing is more kids taking not just those advanced placement classes that some of us that were brainiacs took, but they can take technical college credits. And we're seeing more kids even coming out of high school with almost an associate degree. In the last 5 or 6 years, what's called youth apprenticeship, which is for juniors and seniors, where they actually go out and work in the trades, the numbers of kids participating in that just exploded. So what we're seeing are the lines are beginning to blur between the K-12 system and the technical college system, and between the technical college system and the university, in a way that really is changing education a great deal.
It was always similarly, continuing that line of thought, it was always when I was growing up, if you don't get a college degree, you're not going to make any money. And so what's the wages, salary between a welder now and a sociologist?
Yeah, well, have you tried to hire an electrician lately? Or a plumber? Yeah. I mean, the money in the trades can be very, very good. And even more so now in information technology. If we depend on our phones, our computers, our laptops, and when you need a techie, you need a techie. And those jobs are very lucrative, and jobs, say, in cybersecurity today, but again, welding, carpentry, architecture, we've really kind of recovered the trades as being very legitimate careers for people, and financially lucrative, and very stable jobs. You don't see a lot. Again, we dealt with them 15 years ago, but since the end of the Great Recession, you don't see a lot of manufacturing layoffs. When the Shopko distribution center in De Pere closed down about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was, in the end, there were about 140 workers, and we held a job fair. So we had about 140 workers, we had 120 employers there wanting to hire them. So that whole dynamic has changed a great deal. And again, and you can look at the wage comparisons, that's all out there, but the jobs and the trades are extremely lucrative.
So I'm a baby boomer, 1974 Dodge Swinger.
Yeah.
With a human growth and development degree. But I hear you talking a lot about paradigm shifting here, that we hear younger workers have higher expectations of a work-life balance. We hear that they're interested and invested in where their products are coming from and how they're manufactured. And they don't want to work overtime, so the costs go up to employers to have to hire more workers and increase wages and maybe be more selective with their sourcing. So that all cuts down on me as a baby boomer. I need that company to have a high profit margin to support my 401k. So how are we balancing out these paradigm shifts?
You know, that's a great question. There's and the name is escaping me, but the book is called The Infinite Game, and the author compares what he calls finite thinking to infinite thinking. And finite thinking means I'm playing in a game, and the game has rules, and the game has a time period. And business is different. Business has to go on and on and on, but too many businesses are not thinking past the end of the quarter. And that's a finite game. And we've also, he points out that not long ago what we did is many companies connected exactly the pay of the top executive to the quarterly profit. So the executive can cut costs, lay off people, leave after 5 years. The company's a mess, but he or she has made millions because the incentive. So what we're coming to understand, to get back to kind of answer your question more directly, is for those of us who live off our retirement savings and are in the stock market, a healthy company today has to they have to make money, obviously, but they also have to treat their workers well, and they have to be good citizens in their community. And by the community, I mean the global community in the sense of pollution, as well as contributing to the good of the immediate community. Look what's going on up in Marinette with these PFAS. You know, short-term thinking. And now, I don't know if Johnson Controls knew when they bought Tyco that this was in the condition that it was, but that short-term thinking of we've got this fire suppression product and we can do whatever we want is now in the drinking water and costing the company not just millions in terms of cleanup, but the image as a company is severely suffering. So again, the name of the book I'm reading is called The Infinite Game, even though I can't remember the author offhand, but there's some sense to looking at business from this broader perspective as being profitable.
I'm thinking nationwide a little bit as far as the Rust Belt goes, and coal miners, and the workers that were left behind by Muro in Manitowoc. And kind of the dignity that we're speaking about is that all people have hopefully a desire, but they have they deserve to work. They deserve to earn enough for a decent home and food on the table and a car, whatever. And I want to, I'm just seeing some of the things, manufacturing situations around. I mean, these are computer operated technicians. I mean, it would take me a while to be able to jump into that situation and run one of these things. So what's our responsibility as a society, as church, as as employers? What do we do with those who have a fourth grade reading level, and where do we go with that, and how do we deal with that?
Well, that was my job for 28 years.
How do you catch somebody up from there?
But my first response would be, the wrong thing to do would be to promise anybody that we can turn back the clock and go back to the old days. So when we would often go in and speak with workers, you have to be honest with them and to say, look, it's not 1970 anymore. It's a different world, and if you want to participate in that world, here's how you connect to those opportunities. You know, my wife taught out at NWTC for 15 years, and she taught business technology. So in the days when we had some of those layoffs, she would have people in their 40s and 50s come in, sit down in front of that computer, and just be absolute terrified. Some often in tears, And so I mean, we saw the technical colleges and now the universities more so put in a lot of these student support systems, because I mean, that change was really traumatic, especially for baby boomers. It goes back to the Bureau situation. I mean, we thought we would go work for this company forever, or at least for 35 years, and then have a pension, and so in the early part of the century, when we had all those layoffs, I mean, up in beautiful Surrey, Wisconsin, and they had a factory up there that employed half the town that made wooden baby furniture, and closed. I went up there. We had a big town meeting in the school gymnasium, you know, and I mean, this town was absolutely in shock. So we're walking in, the town chairman, Jay Tousley, turns to me and said, "Well, Jim, you go first." And I mean, go back again to between 2000 and 2010, when we experienced all that. And actually, it goes back into the late 90s, when we had a lot of consolidation in the paper industry as well. I mean, people were scared. But again, we're not doing anybody any favors by thinking that somehow the world's going to snap back into baby boomer land. It's not. So again, what we've seen in our tech colleges and now a little bit more with our universities is a lot of hand-holding, a lot of support as people have gone through these kinds of training programs.
So somebody with that level of education.
Somebody with that level of education, can they get into tech? Can they handle the courses at a tech college?
I've seen it over and over again, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's not as easy. If you're reading at a 4th grade level and you're 40 years old, it's not as easy to get up to speed as it is if you're 16, but you can get up to speed. So again, it's a matter, I think, of speaking the truth to people about the nature of work, the changing nature of work, and then offering them realistic opportunities to get from here to there. Let me give you another example. Up in beautiful Niagara, Wisconsin. So for years and years and years, you had Niagara Paper, one-horse town. Everybody worked there. So when you got out of high school, you either went to Niagara Paper or you left town and went to college. Those are the only two options. So then Niagara was bought up first by Consolidated Paper out of Wisconsin Rapids, and then by Stora Enso, which is a Finnish company, and then finally by NewPage. And the development with NewPage is NewPage was not a paper company. NewPage was an investment company, and they didn't care what they owned as long as it made money. And so Niagara closed. Well, again, shell-shocked. But we had a group of 12 people who, as we went in and provided the services, a group of 12 people in their 40s and 50s, and we put together a nursing program for them. I had one guy who actually did a little video for us at the time, 52 years old, after working almost 30 years in Niagara Paper Company, became a nurse, and he was overjoyed because nobody asked him when he was 18 years old, what do you want to be? It was go to the factory. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of success stories that way, but it does take, a very supportive system, both in the work that we did at Bay Area Workforce Development Board as well as in the schools.
Well, speaking of support systems, do you have any thoughts or ideas of what a parish community might do collectively in support of workers?
That's an interesting question. Well, number one, and that's why I'm really honored to be here tonight, number one, to talk about the realities, because I think a lot of people still don't realize how much the world has changed. Our manufacturers certainly have come to understand that. Many of our employers do. So I think having, and I give you a lot of props for holding a town hall meeting like this, so that we can get the word out to people about what does the workforce look like and what is expected of me in the workforce today. And then after that, you know, I think you want to be, you certainly want to take care of your parish family when things happen, and be aware of the kinds of services that are available, not just education, which is very important, obviously, but also to support a family during a transition time.
Question?
Jim, you talk about the number of jobs that are available, that just about everybody has a help wanted sign out there these days.
Yes.
So, you know, I've heard all kinds of theories, and I'm sure it's a whole lot more complicated than what you hear from people sitting down at the diner or on the bar stool. So can you walk through a little bit, you know, the complexity of, you already mentioned the baby boomers aging out of work, but other factors that might be involved in that?
Well, yeah. Number one, at its base, it's a numbers game. With the baby boomers retiring, we simply do not, even with the millennials, which are a larger cohort, but as the baby boomers move out, we simply do not have enough workers to replace the ones who are leaving. So that's a problem. And then the second problem is that millennial generation has been educated in a way that doesn't connect well to the area economy. But the biggest problem is simply a numbers game. We need more workers. And so we need to attract them to the state, and there's some efforts by a number of organizations to do that. Frankly, we need to reform the stupid immigration system and allow more workers to come in. I was sitting with Congressman Gallagher a couple of years ago, and I said to him, you know, I said, Mike, you guys want to spend $5 billion on a wall. We should spend $5 billion on a computer system that allows people to come into this country as we need them and track them. And anybody who says, well, you're here illegally, go back home and stand in line, does not understand how broken the immigration system is. And you know, number one, we've got these DACA students called the Dreamers, and there's somewhere between 600,000 and 800,000 of them in the country. They're kids who were brought here, people were brought here as kids. And so they weren't born here, they're not legal. One was a real good friend of mine, charming young lady. But they came here as kids, and somehow we cannot figure out a way to give them citizenship. That's crazy. Who are we electing that can't do that? And I'm getting political here a little bit, obviously, but we need workers, and we need a way for workers to come in to our part of the state legally and be able to contribute to our economy. And like it or not, we have a significant number of undocumented people here. And they're in the slaughterhouses, they're in the landscaping, they're in the roofing, and they live in constant fear. We gotta do better than that, you know, period. We gotta do better than that. So that's kind of, I mean, at its base, it's a numbers game, as well as the fact that we live in a part of the country where the economy's been expanding. So it's not just replacing workers who are retiring, but we're growing and we need more workers.
One other question, as a 58-year-old guy who got the undergrad and graduate degrees in theology, which is very useful out there in the workforce, I hear you talk a lot about specialization and in the workforce in terms of trades and focusing in on welding and electrical and things like that. Yep. When I was in school, like now I'm feeling like I'm talking like from the dinosaur ages or something, but you know, we're taught, we went to a liberal education, you know, had this broad-based knowledge. You learned how to learn, all of that. And I see, or I hear you talk about such specialization. Is there a fear in the workplace as well that maybe we're losing the big picture, like the forest, for the trees of being able to, make this ship or, manufacture this part?
Again, that's a really good question. If you talk to a lot of our tradespeople today, I mean, number one, in the trades, and here I'm thinking particularly of construction. I mean, if you're a framing carpenter, there's physical work involved, but at the same time, employers constantly are saying, we want people who can think, who can solve problems, who and more contribute to how we can make our organization more efficient. And in many cases, they're willing to do the training if you can bring that creativity and that thinking skill, especially critical thinking, problem solving, into the equation. So, and then of course the whole thing with information technology and artificial intelligence is a different level, because you're pulling out some of the physicality of that, but you got to be able to think. Now, if you're programming a robot, it's a certain kind of thinking. But the other thing that comes to mind is one of the big discussions that's going on is, okay, so now I'm a Cracker Jack machinist, and I'm making $75,000 a year, and I've got more free time on my hands. And this is where I'm familiar with the acronym STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, which are in high demand. Now we want to talk about STEAM and add arts in there. Because if I have this lifestyle now, how do I appreciate it? And that's just a key question. And frankly, there's a lot of discussion about what does that mean yet, and where does that liberal arts education, which is very valuable, where's that going to fit? After all, who's going to do the Sunday crossword puzzle? But there is a lot of creativity involved in many of these trades jobs.
We had a discussion yesterday, I guess it was, the day before, about how the church's role through history has oftentimes helped the worker and the average person trying to make a living, trying to find a dignified home. And we're part of BPH here and buying homes and helping people to get a home for themselves. And it's often in the past, it's been the church looking out for the worker. And as you mentioned earlier in your topic on the dignity of work, it's the church's understanding of life generally is still in a male-dominated atmosphere. And the patriarchy is still strong in the Catholic Church, and that is still our framework, generally speaking, that we operate out of and make our regulations and rules and how we forecast the future. And again, I'm kind of going back with in the sense, the church has had a very strong voice in the past as to what employers would do. For example, can they open on Sunday? Well, Father, is going to have a say in that, and a very strong say in the 50 years ago, 100 years ago. That's not there today, much less so. And on the flip side of that, not only does Father not have as strong a say, but the world economy, employers, the education system, P&G in their commercials are saying women are as competent as men. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. You just have the video and those who have disabilities and a wheelchair, and you can do what you did before you had the accident. And LGBTQ. So there's a strong voice coming from society and the workplace to be able to push against, in a sense, right, where we are as church and how the church views humanity and how the church, the church's voice is, I guess it's my own personal opinion, it's getting lost. And some very strong voices out there that says, no, there's equality here. And when you go into the workplace, this is what you have to live by. And when you come to church, it can be very different, depending on where you go to church, of course. So you have a degree in theology and you have a degree in public administration.
Yes.
So where are you in that, as far as?
Well, that's
It's loaded, I
well,
get it.
it is. Let me make two comments. The first comment is that the church has a responsibility, and we have not always done this very well, that the people that you employ, are they given a fair wage? Are they given health insurance? Are they given a retirement plan? So the church has not always done that. And a lot of people over the years, certainly in my baby boomer years, sacrificed so that they could teach in the Catholic system. And of course, the different orders of nuns, very much so. I mean, the way that the church used those ladies and gave them very little in return very often. And we have, the diocese here has been very good in recent years about trying to make sure that as the sisters age, that they have a comfort retirement. But again, number one, the church has a responsibility to make sure that it's treating its people with dignity. And number two, and this is a tougher question right here, is where does spirituality fit today? Our Catholic Christian spirituality in many ways is rooted in, as you said, Father Tom, in a very old worldview, and the assumptions that underlie it probably are no longer valued, are no longer valid. There was a time not long ago when the priest was the most educated person in the community, and everybody obviously believed everything he said because he was and that's just all changed now. So we're in a period of time where we really have to ask, what does spirituality mean for people in 2022? And that's just a tough question. I see a lot of groups, maybe shouldn't say this, but I see a lot of groups that are kind of passing off pop psychology as spirituality. And good, but that really doesn't go deep enough. And for those of us who have been trained or certainly have an appreciation of the rich Christian tradition of spirituality, those are just important questions to be asked, and it is all I can say, because we have no easy answers right now. But in order to do good by our young people especially, we really need to try to figure out what does spirituality mean in 2022.
Yeah, my hope and prayer is that there is a healthy dialogue that continues, and one influence the other, because there's obviously a lot of value in our spirituality and our church and our theology and morality that we need to keep up going, and we have to keep enriching and applying to what's happening today. At the same time, we have to be we have to be speaking in a voice that people can hear, and to be able to do that is a challenge, and we need to reflect on that and to pray a lot with that.
Yeah, there's simply no easy answers, and again, I kind of stand back, and because I don't have the answers either. But on the one hand, I'm seeing, biblical literalism. Well, again, I shouldn't say this, but we had a situation with one of our local state representatives recently that was on the front page of the paper, and there was some question about physically punishing a young child, and his response was to quote the book of Proverbs, to say, spare the rod and spoil the child. Well, I mean, I'm horrified by that, horrified. He doesn't eat ham or bacon, and you know, because he's going to be a Bible guy, and that he observes the Sabbath, and that if his neighbor is cutting the lawn on the Sabbath, that he smites him. But well, if it's in the Bible, you got to do it.
Be consistent, right?
Yeah, you know, so biblical literalism is obviously not a solution here, and neither again is pop psychology. So how do we, and the challenge that I give to you is how do you delve into the rich history of Christianity and pull out those things that can be of value today?
Right. Thank you, Jim. Wow.
Thanks.
Do you want to
Thanks for
say
having me.
thank you and good night, or do you have a final wisdom thought for us?
No, I really,
You sort of do have the white hair
that's my Irish heritage, yeah. No, an honor to be asked to come. I hope that some of the things that I shared were of value, and we all just keep kind of really trying to do these challenges. I guess the one thing I will say, as a gentleman who retired a year ago, I look around Northeast Wisconsin, and there are so many wonderful young people doing so many wonderful things to build this community, to build this economy, to reach out to those who are struggling. It's a complete joy to know some of those people and to just see all the good stuff going on.
Good. Thanks, Jim. I actually got a little flustered in the beginning, and I wanted to pray a prayer, and I'd like to do it now. It's a prayer for all workers. It actually comes from the UCC Church and their congregation, but it's a beautiful prayer that speaks of the dignity and the presence in all who are employers, employees, those who are working in a challenging situation today. So we ask your special blessing on all people who labor, either for pay or as volunteers, in jobs or at school, in the workplace or at home, in the U.S. and around the world. We especially pray for your blessings on workers who do not have jobs and for those whose inadequate pay does not allow them to live the full life you intend for each of us. Creator God, help us to build a new world in the midst of the old, a world where all workers are valued, a world where those who clean houses are also able to buy houses to live in, a world where those who grow food can also afford to eat their fill. We pray for the coming of a world where all workers everywhere share in the abundance that you have given us. And we ask these things knowing that you give us the courage and strength to live out our faith in the workplace and the marketplace, as well as in the sanctuary. Amen. Amen. Again, thank you, Jim. And with the special skills of technology, thank you, Katie, for making this happen. You're not just a sociology major, you have real skills.